I finished Clair Obscur Expedition 33 the other day. The game is amazing. I love it. One of my favorite games of all time. I really do like the title of Clair Obscur. And I do like the origin of the wording, where it comes from the Italian painting term Chiaroscuro, which is basically light and dark. Clair is light, obscure is dark. Italian painting Chiaroscuro is also light and dark. And I think that it ties in very well thematically within the game and everything. But this is not a game review. This is just me I'm gonna talk about painting. I'm gonna talk about lighting. I'm gonna talk a little bit about chiaroscuro. So I have this drawing here. I'm not a renderer. This took me like 2 hours, so it's still a little rough. But I painted Maelle. I don't really paint. I'm more of a line guy, so I was a bit nervous getting into this drawing, but I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna talk about Clair Obscur and I'm gonna talk about chiaroscuro. So what is chiaroscuro? Chiaroscuro is this like painting approach, this concept of painting, an Italian concept. It's from like way back in the day, like Caravaggio, old painters like Caravaggio, Rembrandt. We all know Rembrandt triangle. It's like a way of depicting light and shadow in a way that really explains not only the form, but also explains the emotion and the feeling of a drawing, of a piece. Chiaroscuro can also be interpreted as like strong contrast, or maybe not specifically strong, but most of the time it's strong, but like maybe intentional contrast, adding in specific light and shadows, strong lights, strong shadows. And what kind of a result does that give? It gives like this very 3D and alive feeling. It does tie into real life. The effect of having a really strong light source and clarity within the lights, and then having everything be obscured or fade away into the darkness, into the shadows, is that it mimics how humans actually see reality. When we look around, our eyes focus on one specific thing at a time. Our eyes do not take everything within our cone of vision in at full definition. We have stuff that we focus on, specific focal points that we're looking at every specific time, and then the peripheral vision is blurred out and not important. So when we take that idea into our rendering, our designs, our paintings, or whatever, it should inform how we design our light and our shadow shapes, but it also informs how much detail we put in certain spots. So you can see like right here, right now, I'm gonna pause. Very clearly in the very early portion of my drawing, in the sketching phase, in the blockout phase, I am clearly defining what is in shadow and what is in light. You can see it right here when I'm still blocking out the face and trying to find the proportions. I start adding in the shape of light, right? All of this would be in shadow. I start designing that out and thinking about how it goes, right? And of course, I'm copying from reference, so I'm able to sort of see how the light is falling, but then it's just the intentional choice of making sure that this line is the barrier, here is light, here is dark, and no values in the dark area will be any of the values in the light area. The values will not sort of meander and bleed into each other. Putting all of this into a shadow value. And I think that this is where chiaroscuro, the idea, really comes into play. Because once you have the light and the dark defined, it's very important to determine which side you want to render. So in this specific case, my choice is to put all the shadow in darkness and have no detail. Maybe very minimal, but like zero. This eye does not get drawn. This eye will, because this eye is on the light side of the face. There is still some shadow here, but there are parts of the eye that are in light, or there are parts of the eye that are catching a lot of reflected light bouncing off from the nose, from the cheek. So that's part of the big decision making. Now you can also flip it. You can flip it to where everything in the light is very overexposed and blown out, like white, and then everything in the shadow is rendered, and that'll have a completely different effect. What is the effect of all of this chiaroscuro? I think that a lot of the themes and the thematic approaches, which also align a bit with Clair Obscur, but I'm not going to go too deep into it to avoid spoilers. The light really shows the importance of things. So in this case, I'm putting half of her face in shadow to sort of hide a part of her, but also putting the other half in light to showcase the importance of one part. So that way, once you see this drawing, your eyes will know exactly where they're supposed to look. So this is just going into rendering. My way of rendering is super, I don't know, barbaric or something. I don't have a technique. I just go in, I separated the lights and the darks. These two sides do not intersect. Everything in the dark is kind of getting faded out. You know, I'm just trying to push it back as much as I can. And then I'm putting in the mid-tone value, or just the light values. And then I'm adding in one last blown out highlight, very hot region. That's just from the reference. I'm just looking at the reference. But for Chiaroscuro specifically, Chiaroscuro has like this effect where it's very like theatrical, very dramatic, because you have such a strong light source. Think of theater, think of plays, Shakespearean, where they have big spotlights, strong cast shadows on the face, things like that, which I'm trying to capture the effect right here. And there's also this idea of intimacy, which I think is pretty fun, where Chiaroscuro, because everything so much is in shadow and only a specific section is in the light, there's a strong contrast, the background will fade away, or the less important parts will fade away, so that way it makes it feel like the room or the space that you're in is very small. And then it gives a lot of intimacy, a lot of closeness, because the audience, whoever sees the drawing, knows exactly what is important, and it feels like they're right there with that moment. It's very dramatic, very, very artistic too. Artsy fartsy, chiaroscuro. If you want to paint portraits, the Asaro head is a good way to go. You know, me painting the face, it's so complicated, I don't know how to do it. Paint small, practice values, and do a lot of studies, but also paint the Asaro head a lot. The Asaro head teaches you the planes of the face, you can start very broad with just, you know, the main angles and the main rhythms of the face, and then you slowly want to add in the smaller and smaller planes. But yeah, I'm doing the hair. I don't really like hair, but it's just making sure you do big blocks of value to piece it all together. And here, this is where my painting knowledge struggles, where I'm like trying to capture Maelle's likeness, but I just can't really get it right. But you can see me trying to figure out a lot. It's mainly the nose. I recommend painting a lot in black and white so that you see and you train your eyes to practice value, and you see the subtle value shifts as well as developing the planes of the face. I keep on adjusting the composition, adjusting the faces and stuff like that, but you can kind of start seeing like how strong I'm trying to push the chiaroscuro, the light and dark shadow shapes. So right here, boom, a little pocket of light, but all of this shadow. You don't need to know what's here. You don't have to paint what's here. I'm lazy, right? I did this in 2 hours, and I don't like spending a lot of time, you know, doing like 40 hours on a single drawing. That's just me. The effect of simplifying all of this is not only because I'm lazy, but also it gives the dramatic effect. The light is hitting here. When you see this, your eyes would probably, when I'm done with this, your eyes would probably land around here, but also land around here, because these are where the values are, and the highest contrast, where you have really bright lights going into midtones and a lot of detail right here in the eye. And then here is just really, really bright. And then once you get to here, your eyes can just fill in the details. When you're looking at this area, your peripheral vision fills in the details, all of these details. This is secondary. This is kind of like where the idea of like the first read, second read, third read. Your first read would be ideally around here, because you have high contrast for one. You have two, you have a lot of detail. So this would be the main read. And then you can go over here, which is the second read, and this is where going to be like very high values, really bright, so your eyes will go from here to here. And then your eyes can wander. There's also this third section right here with the little pins, so this can be a third one, and then it goes into this murkiness that your eyes will glaze over, and it can just go right back into the eye. That's sort of the analysis of this whole thought process. So you always want to think about how your audience is going to react and look at the drawing. So here I just have a multiply layer, and I'm just putting in some color. I'm not really a putting color later person. I've tried using gradient maps, I've tried using a bunch of different ways of putting color in, but it's just never really clicked for me. I like going right into color, but in this case, because I was focusing on Chiaroscuro, I went black and white first, and then I tried messing around with the color. I kind of like going right into color because I can play around with it more and I can do more color variations. But here I just feel like, oh man, I already have the values so set up. I don't want to mess up my values by messing around with color now. So I feel more timid with using color. But you can start seeing I'm trying to punch up the areas that I want the viewer to see, and I'm zooming out really far, just trying to see the general feel of everything. And even though like in here I'm like zooming out, I'm also zooming out physically. But essentially this is just about it. So just to recap the chiaroscuro ideas, when you want to render, when you want to start painting light and shadow, you want to first identify what is in light, what is in shadow very early on. Basically in this phase right here, I'm thinking of what is in light, what is in shadow by drawing these triangle shapes and looking at everything this way. And then you kind of want to block everything out. The rule with the values to always remember, the mantra to chant is the darkest light is still lighter than the lightest dark. Whatever values you have in here, it might look like, oh, this is getting a little bit brighter right here or whatever. It's still going to be a lot darker than whatever's in the light. You want to create that strong separation and make sure that there's no overlapping. Segregate them. Segregate the lights and do not let them intermingle. The next idea in chiaroscuro, after you've done this separation of everything, you want to focus on one side. So if you want to focus on the light, you render out the light regions and then you kind of leave the dark regions in shadow. Or you can go the other way where you render out the dark regions and then leave the light in, very blown out light. It just depends on whatever situation or lighting scenario you're in or that you want to make. The reasoning because your eyes tend to focus on one thing in real life as you're looking around. So in your paintings, you don't want to put everything into detail. You want to focus on a specific part into detail. So in this case, here, my details all reside in this little corner over here, and then it gets into here, becomes more detailed. Everything else fades away into the darkness because I do not want you looking over here. It does not matter what's over here, right? Don't look here. You're looking here. And this is where I'm spending most of my time planning out the stuff in the light, the mid-tone values, the values where the form is shifting from, blown out highlight to mid-tones to light values and then to dark. These regions, this area here, this is the second most important area to look at. And your eyes would typically go from here to here. Now you might say like, oh, this area is so bright, you might want to, maybe you look over here first, or maybe you might think, oh, maybe people might look over here first. But the other part of it is that when you're drawing a portrait, humans, social creatures, social animals, it's so hard to draw faces, right? Because we are very sensitive to how human faces look, because we've grown up doing that. We've had like millennia of history looking at human faces for survival and whatever. So our instincts will naturally push us to look at the face. So basically there's a face tax, there's a face buff right now. Because if it's a face, it already has like a +2 to like attention grabbing. At least that's how I see it. There's a bunch of detail here to help out. Here is also blurred out. I didn't put too much detail. So the detail, the lighting, the fact that it's a face and there's an eye here, and also the strong contrast in the details push this area to be very, very attention grabbing. So that's chiaroscuro, the contrast of light and dark. This is a visual way of thinking. And also, even if you don't do like portraits and stuff like me, it's also a way of design. So like when you want to design characters or whatever, you can design in that idea of put focus on one area, leave space for the eyes to rest and not focus on, and not make everything so detailed. But yeah, that's chiaroscuro.